On a warm summer night in 1993, James Jordan pulled his red Lexus to the side of Highway 74 in Lumberton, North Carolina. Exhausted from a long drive, he decided to rest his eyes for just a moment. That simple decision would change basketball, history forever, and launch a mystery that would take decades to unravel. The beloved father of the world's greatest basketball star never made it home that night. The official story, a random carjacking gone wrong, seemed to answer all the questions. But 25 years later, as new evidence emerges, the truth appears far more sinister than anyone imagined. What really happened on that lonely highway? And how far would some people go to keep those secrets buried? This is the story of a son's quest for justice, a father's ultimate sacrifice, and the dark shadows lurking behind the glory of America's favorite game. James Jordan tapped his fingers on the steering wheel of his shiny red Lexus. The digital clock on the dashboard glowed 11:42 p.m. He was tired. The drive back from the funeral in Wilmington had been long, and Highway 74 stretched before him like a dark ribbon through Lumberton, North Carolina. Just a quick rest, James mumbled to himself, pulling onto the shoulder. The summer night was warm and sticky. He rolled down the window a crack, letting in the chirp of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. James reached into his pocket and pulled out the gold championship ring his son Michael had given him. The diamonds caught the moonlight, sending tiny sparkles across the car's interior. He smiled, remembering the day Michael had pressed it into his palm. "You earned this as much as I did, Pops," Michael had said, his eyes shining with pride. No, father could have been prouder than James was of his son. From shooting hoops on their homemade backyard court in Wilmington to becoming the greatest basketball player in the world, James had watched Michael soar. He yawned and leaned his seat back. His wife Dolores would be waiting up, worried. He should call her, but his eyelids felt so heavy. He'd just close them for 15 minutes, then finish the drive home. As James drifted off, the red Lexus with the license plate reading ONC023 sat alone on the highway shoulder, its driver unaware that these would be his final moments of peace. 3 days earlier, James had sat in the front row at Chicago Stadium, watching his son play in Game 6 of the NBA Finals. Michael had scored 33 points, leading the Chicago Bulls to their third straight championship. When the final buzzer sounded, James had jumped to his feet, clapping until his hands hurt. Later, in the locker room, amid the champagne spray and reporters' shouted questions, Michael had found his father. "We did it again, Pops," he'd said, wrapping his arms around James. "You did it, son," James corrected, his voice thick with emotion. "Your mama and I just gave you the tools. You built this." "Got our golf game next week?" Michael asked, wiping champagne from his eyes. "Wouldn't miss it," James promised. "Though I don't know why I keep letting you beat me." They both knew why. From the time Michael was small, James had taught him that nothing worth having came easy. He never let Michael win, not at basketball, not at baseball, not at golf. If Michael wanted victory, he had to earn it. And boy, had he earned it. Now, as James slept in his car, he dreamed of the backyard in Wilmington where it had all begun. In his dream, Michael was 10 years old again, skinny legs pumping as he dribbled. A worn basketball across the dirt court James had built him. "You gotta want it more than the other guy, Mike," James called, playing defense against his son. "When you're tired and hurting, that's when champions are made." Little Michael's tongue stuck out in concentration, a habit that would follow him to the NBA. He faked left, then darted right, just like James had taught him. The ball swished through the makeshift hoop. A rim James had bolted to an old wooden backboard. "That's it!" James whooped, lifting his son onto his shoulders. "That's my boy!" A car slowed as it passed the red Lexus on the highway shoulder. Inside, two young men peered at the sleeping driver. "Check that ride," one whispered. "Bet he's got cash." The car pulled over, 50 yards ahead. Back in the Lexus, James stirred but didn't wake. On the seat beside him lay his wallet and a small duffel bag. The gold championship ring glinted on his finger, and an expensive watch, another gift from Michael, wrapped his wrist. Across the country in Chicago, Michael Jordan was restless. He paced his luxury apartment, unable to sleep despite the exhaustion. From the playoff run and the celebrations that followed, something felt off. He picked up the phone, then set it down again. It was too late to call his father. They'd talk tomorrow when they met for golf. Michael had news. He was thinking about walking away from basketball, maybe trying baseball. His father had always loved baseball. "What do you think, Pops?" Michael asked the empty room, as if his father might somehow hear him from hundreds of miles away. Morning light filtered through the trees along Highway 74, but James Jordan's red Lexus was gone. Only a few scattered. Items remained on the shoulder. A bull's cap that had fallen from the car, a scrap of paper with Michael's number, and small dark stains on the asphalt that the coming rain would soon wash away. Several miles off, in a wooded area that few people visited, the Lexus sat stripped of its valuables. No license plate, no stereo, no sign of the ring or watch, or the man who had worn them. James Jordan, father of the world's greatest basketball player, had vanished. In Chicago, Michael checked his watch again. His father was 3 hours late for their golf game. It wasn't like him to be late. Not for anything, but especially not for time with his son. "He probably got held up," said Michael's mother Dolores over the phone, but her voice carried a note of worry. "You know your daddy. Always helping somebody." "Yeah," Michael said, but a strange feeling settled in his stomach. "Call me when he gets home, okay?" As he hung up, Michael couldn't know that this was the beginning of a mystery that would change his life forever. The questions would start small. Where is James Jordan? But would grow into something much darker, with answers that would one day shake the foundation of everything Michael thought he knew about his father's death. For now, though, he was just a son waiting for his dad, unaware that their golf game would never happen, and that the next time he saw his father, James would be lying still in a casket, his secrets buried with him, or so everyone thought. The hours ticked by slowly. Michael Jordan paced his Chicago penthouse, phone pressed to his ear. "Still nothing?" he asked, his voice tense. "No, baby," Dolores Jordan replied. Her usual calm was slipping. "I've called everyone. Nobody's seen him since he left the funeral." Michael ran a hand over his shaved head. His father had never been unreliable, not once in his life. James Jordan was the most dependable person Michael knew. Basketball scouts, coaches, reporters, they all asked Michael where he got his legendary work ethic. The answer was always the same: from his father. "Coming home," Michael said finally. "No, you stay put for now," his mother insisted. "Maybe he decided to visit your uncle in Charlotte. You know how he drives around sometimes, just thinking." But they both knew better. James wouldn't miss a golf date with his son. Not without calling. The next morning, Michael called the Bulls' office to let them know he wouldn't be at the publicity events scheduled that week. Phil Jackson, his coach, asked no questions when Michael explained the situation. That was one thing Michael appreciated about Jackson. He understood family came first. "Take whatever time you need. Jackson said. "Just keep me posted." 3 days after James's disappearance, the Jordan family filed a missing persons report. The local Wilmington officer taking the information looked bored until he realized whose father was missing. "Michael Jordan? The Michael Jordan?" he asked, suddenly attentive. "My husband isn't missing because of who our son is," Dolores said, sharply. "He's missing because something's wrong." The officer promised to put out an alert for James and his red Lexus. But when the family left, Michael overheard him telling another officer it was probably nothing, just an adult who decided to take off for a while. 56-year-old men don't just take off, Michael said, turning back. His 6'6" frame seemed to fill the entire doorway. "Not my father." The officer straightened, flushing. "Of course, Mr. Jordan. We'll do everything we can." In the Robeson County Sheriff's Department, Deputy Marcus Williams scrolled through the day's alerts on his computer. The name Jordan caught his eye. James Jordan, 56. Last seen July 22nd, driving a red Lexus SC400, North Carolina plate UNC0223. Williams sat up straighter. He'd grown up in North Carolina, watching Michael Jordan play for the Tar Heels. Every kid who ever picked up a basketball wanted to be like Mike. He clicked through to the full report, frowning as he read. 3 days missing already, and nobody had spotted the car. In rural North Carolina, a red Lexus would stand out. "Sheriff," Williams called across the office, "I think we should look into this missing person case." Sheriff Tom Davis glanced up from his paperwork. "The Jordan case? Probably just a guy who needed a break." "It's Michael Jordan's father," Williams pressed. "And his car's missing too. Something doesn't feel right." Davis sighed. "Fine. Check the highways and rest stops. But don't make a circus of it. Last thing we need is reporters crawling all over the county." Williams nodded and grabbed his keys. He'd start with Highway 74. It was the main route from Wilmington, where the report said James had last been seen. Michael sat with his siblings in their mother's living room in Charlotte. Larry, James Jr., and Roslyn had all come as soon as they heard the news. Only Michael's sister Dolores was absent, stuck overseas but calling every few hours for updates. "The police aren't doing enough," Larry said, always the most outspoken of the Jordan children. "They think because he's a grown man, he just wandered off," Roslyn added, her eyes red from crying. Michael stared at the phone, willing it to ring with news. His mind replayed the last conversation he'd had with his father after the championship game. James had been so proud, beaming as he hugged his son in the locker room. "I need to do more," Michael said suddenly. "I'm calling a press conference." "Are you sure?" asked James Jr. "Once the media gets hold of this?" Michael nodded grimly. "If Dad's out there in trouble, we need every eye in the country looking for him." The press conference made national news. Michael Jordan, usually so confident and controlled, looked tired and scared as he asked the public for help finding his father. "My father is everything to me," he said, his deep voice catching. "If anyone has seen him or his car, please contact the authorities." The photograph of James Jordan, smiling, arm around Michael at the championship celebration, was shown. On every news channel that night, calls flooded police stations across the Carolinas. Most were dead ends, people who thought they might have seen a red Lexus. Or worse, those just wanting to be part of the famous case. In his small apartment, Deputy Williams pinned a map to his wall, marking each reported sighting with red thumbtacks, most clustered around Charlotte and Wilmington. But one call, from a gas station attendant in Fairmont, caught his attention. The man remembered a red Lexus stopping for fuel late on the night of July 22nd. The driver seemed real tired. "The poo," attendant had said. "Nice guy, though. Left me a $5 tip." Williams added the thumbtack and drew a line from Wilmington through Fairmont, extending along Highway 74. James Jordan had been heading west. But to where? And why had no one seen him since? 2 weeks after James disappeared, Michael received a call from his mother. Her voice was strange, almost hollow. "The credit card company called," she said. "Someone's been using your father's American Express." A spark of hope flared in Michael's chest. "Then he's alive?" The pause told him everything. "The police don't think it's him using it," Dolores said softly. "They're tracing the charges." The card had been used at convenience stores in Lumberton and Fayetteville. Small purchases, beer, cigarettes, snack foods, not the kind of things James Jordan would buy. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He stood at his window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. The city that had embraced him, made him a legend, now felt cold and distant. His thoughts kept circling back to his father. James had always been there, at games, at practices, at every important moment of Michael's life. Even as fame changed everything around him, his father remained his anchor, the voice that kept him grounded. "I'm scared, Pops," Michael whispered to the empty room. "Where are you?" In his hand, he clutched the baseball his father had given him when he was 10 years old. "You could be great at this too, Mike," James had told him. "Maybe even better than basketball." Michael had laughed then, but now the thought lingered. His father had loved baseball. What would he think if Michael switched sports? The idea took root in his mind, a way to honor his father if the worst had happened, and deep down, Michael was beginning to fear the worst. The phone rang, startling. Him. It was Deputy Williams. "Mr. Jordan," he said, his voice solemn. "We've found a body in South Carolina. We need someone from the family to come identify some personal effects." The baseball fell from Michael's hand, rolling across the floor until it disappeared under the sofa. Out of sight, but not forgotten. Just like the questions about what really happened to James Jordan, questions that would soon demand answers. The Gum Swamp Creek in McCole, South Carolina, was a place most locals avoided. Thick mud, snapping turtles, and water moccasins kept all but the most determined fishermen away. But on August 3, 1993, Curtis Freeman had been determined. The recent rains had stirred up the catfish, and he needed dinner. What he found instead would make national headlines. "I thought it was a log at first," Curtis later told reporters, his voice shaking. "Then I saw the shirt." The body was badly decomposed after 11 days in the water. The summer heat had done its work. If not for a gold watch still clinging to the bloated wrist, identification might have been impossible. Deputy Marcus Williams stood at the creek's edge as the coroner's team worked. The body had been found 60 miles from where James Jordan's car had last been spotted. How had he ended up here? "You need to see this," the coroner called, holding up the victim's right hand. Even tarnished by creek water, the Chicago Bulls championship ring was unmistakable. In Chicago, Michael Jordan sat motionless as his mother sobbed into the phone. His siblings had been called. The family needed to come to South Carolina to make a formal identification. "Are they sure?" Michael asked, his voice flat, emotionless. They were. Dental records would later confirm what the personal effects already told them. James Jordan was dead. When Michael hung up the phone, he didn't cry. Instead, he walked to his bedroom and closed the door. His bodyguard, standing outside, would later describe hearing the sound of breaking glass, followed by a silence more frightening than any scream. The press gathered outside Michael's Chicago apartment building like vultures. Camera flashes lit up the night as he emerged, sunglasses hiding his swollen eyes despite the darkness. He said nothing, pushing past the shouted questions. "Michael, how are you handling your father's death? Did you know your father was missing for 11 days before they found him? Is it true he was shot?" The last question made him falter, just for a moment. It was the first he'd heard of how his father died. His bodyguard quickly ushered him into a waiting car. Inside, Michael pressed his forehead against the cool window glass, watching the city lights blur as tears finally came. The Jordan family gathered at their mother's home in Charlotte. For once, no cameras were allowed inside. The world's most famous athlete was just a son grieving with his brothers and sisters. The police say it was a robbery, Larry Jordan told the family, having spoken with investigators. They found his car stripped in Fayetteville. "Why would anyone kill him for a car?" Rosalind sobbed. "Why not just take it?" No one had answers. Michael said little, lost in his own thoughts. Images of his father flashed through his mind. James cheering from the sidelines at high school games. James helping him move into his college dorm at North Carolina. James hugging him after his first NBA championship. "Who's going to stand up with me now?" Michael whispered, so softly only his sister heard him. In Robeson County, the investigation moved quickly. A red Lexus with no license plates had been found abandoned in the woods near Fayetteville. Inside were fast food wrappers, fingerprints, and a single bullet hole through the driver's seat. Phone records showed calls made from James Jordan's car phone after his disappearance. The calls were traced to the homes of two teenagers, Daniel Green and Larry Demery, both with previous criminal records. When police searched Green's home, they found the Bulls cap James had been wearing and a video of Green dancing while wearing James Jordan's watch and championship ring. "We got him," Sheriff Davis told Deputy Williams. "Open and shut case." But Williams wasn't so sure. Something about the scene at the creek bothered him. The body had been dumped 60 miles from where the car was found. Why drive that far with a dead man in the trunk? The funeral for James Jordan was held at Rockfish AME Church in Teachey, North Carolina, where he had grown up. The small church couldn't hold all the mourners. Basketball stars, celebrities, and hundreds of ordinary people who had never met James came to pay their respects. Michael entered last, holding his mother's arm. His face was a mask, revealing nothing of the storm inside him. He took his place in the front pew beside his siblings. The basketball world was there. Bulls teammates Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant, Coach Phil Jackson, and even rivals like Isaiah Thomas and Patrick Ewing had come to support Michael. James Raymond Jordan was more than the father of a famous son, the pastor began. He was a man who believed in hard work, in family, and in God. When it was Michael's turn to speak, he approached the pulpit slowly. For a moment, he just stood there, looking down at his father's casket. "My father," he started, then stopped as his voice broke. The church was so quiet, you could hear the ceiling fans turning overhead. Michael took a deep breath and tried again. "My father was my rock. He taught me what it means to be a man, to work hard, to keep your word." Michael's deep voice steadied as he spoke. "He never missed a game. Even when I was just starting out, playing in gyms where the scoreboard didn't even work right, he was there." Tears streamed down Michael's face now, but he didn't wipe them away. "People always ask me who my hero is. It was him. It was always him." In the front row, Dolores Jordan clutched a handkerchief to her mouth, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I don't know how to say goodbye to my dad," Michael continued, "so I won't. I'll just say thank you. Thank you for being exactly the father I needed." As Michael returned to his seat, the church stood in applause, not for the basketball star, but for the son honoring his father. Later that night, alone in his childhood bedroom, Michael made a decision. Basketball had been his life, his passion. But now, without his father to share it with, the joy was gone. He thought about the baseball they used to play catch with in the backyard. His father had always said Michael could have gone pro in baseball too, if he'd wanted. "Maybe that's what I'll do, Pops," Michael whispered to the empty room. "Maybe I'll play baseball for you." 2 months later, Michael Jordan would shock the world by announcing his retirement from basketball at age 30, after 3 consecutive NBA championships. What the world didn't know was that the investigation into James Jordan's murder was just beginning, and the questions it would raise would haunt Michael for decades to come. Detective Sarah Coleman had seen her share of murder cases in Robeson County, but never one involving the father of the world's most famous athlete. The pressure was intense, with reporters camped outside the sheriff's office and calls coming in from the FBI, state police, and even the White House. "I want everything by the book," Coleman told her team as they gathered around the caseboard. "No shortcuts, no assumptions. This isn't just about who Michael Jordan is, it's about justice for James Jordan." The evidence seemed straightforward. James Jordan had been shot once in the chest while sleeping in his car. The bullet had entered just below his right collarbone, killing him almost instantly. The coroner estimated he'd been dead several hours before his body was dumped in Swamp Creek. The victim's personal items were taken: wallet, watch, ring, Coleman said, pointing to photos on the board. His car was stolen and later found stripped in Fayetteville. Deputy Williams raised his hand. "Something doesn't add up. The creek is 60 miles from where the car was found. Why drive that far with a body?" Coleman nodded, having wondered the same thing. Maybe they were trying to hide the connection between the murder and the car theft. The break in the case came from James Jordan's cell phone records. After his disappearance, several calls had been made from his car phone. Most were just random numbers, as if someone was testing the phone, but 3 calls were traced to homes in Lumberton. When detectives showed up at the home of Daniel Green, they found a 19-year-old with a juvenile record for assault. His friend, Larry Demery, also 19, lived nearby. Both denied any knowledge of James Jordan or his car. But a search of Green's bedroom told a different story. Hidden in his closet was a Chicago Bulls cap with a bullet hole through it, the same cap James Jordan had been wearing when he disappeared. A video camera revealed footage of Green dancing around, wearing James Jordan's watch and championship ring. "We got you," Coleman told Green during his interrogation. "The evidence is clear." Green just smirked. "You got nothing. That stuff was given to me." "Given to you? By who?" "Larry," Green said simply. "Ask him where he got it." When detectives questioned Larry Demery, his story quickly fell apart. After 6 hours of interrogation, he confessed, but put all the blame on Daniel. "Green, we were just looking to rob someone," Demery said, tears streaming down his face. "We saw this nice car on the side of the road. We didn't know who the guy was." According to Demery, they approached the car intending to steal it. When they saw James sleeping, Green suddenly pulled out a .38 revolver and shot him through the window. "It happened so fast," Demery claimed. "I couldn't stop him. Daniel just shot him. Then we pushed his body into the trunk and drove off." Detective Coleman listened carefully, noting the inconsistencies in Demery's story. The bullet hole was in the driver's seat, not the window. The entry wound suggested James had been shot at close range, not from outside the car. "Why dump the body 60 miles away?" Coleman asked. "Daniel wanted to hide what we'd done," DeMary said. "We drove around for hours, trying to figure out what to do. Green was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, armed robbery, and conspiracy. Demery, after agreeing to testify against his friend, was charged as an accessory." The news hit the Jordan family hard. Michael was in Chicago when his mother called with the update. "They've arrested 2 boys," Dolores said, her voice trembling. "Just teenagers." "Why?" Michael asked, the single word containing all his pain and confusion. "Why did they do it?" "They say it was random. Wrong place, wrong time?" Michael hung up the phone and sat in silence. The idea that his father had died for a car, a watch, and a ring seemed impossible to process. All that life, all that love, ended on a whim by strangers who didn't even know who they were killing. In Lumberton, another mother was struggling to make sense of the news. Ebony Green sat in her small living room, staring at the television as reporters discussed her son's arrest. "My Daniel isn't a killer," she told Deputy Williams when he came to ask follow-up questions. "He's made mistakes, but murder? No." "The evidence says otherwise, ma'am," Williams replied gently. "What evidence? Larry Demery's word?" Ebony shook, her head fiercely. "Those 2 had a falling out weeks before Mr. Jordan died. Larry's blaming my son to save himself." Williams made a note. This was the first he'd heard of a falling out between the suspects. "Daniel was home that night," Ebony insisted. "I heard him come in before midnight, the time they say that man was killed." "Can anyone else verify that?" "No." Ebony's shoulders slumped. "I'm a single mother. It was just us here." As Williams left, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The case seemed too neat, too quickly resolved. In his experience, the truth was rarely so tidy. The arraignment drew national attention. Michael Jordan wasn't there. His family had insisted he stay away from the media circus, but cameras captured every moment as Green and Demery were led into the courtroom in shackles. Green looked defiantly at the cameras. Demery kept his eyes on the floor. "How do you plead?" the judge asked Green. "Not guilty," he answered firmly. "I didn't kill anyone." Outside the courthouse, protesters gathered. Some carried signs demanding justice for James Jordan. Others questioned whether 2 black teenagers could get a fair trial in such a high-profile case. Rachel Harmon, a public defender assigned to Green's case, pushed through the crowd. She'd spent the weekend reviewing the evidence and had concerns. "The state's case relies almost entirely on the testimony of Larry Demery," she told reporters, "a co-defendant with every reason to lie." No one paid much attention to Harmon that day. The case seemed open and shut. 2 teens with criminal records, caught with the victim's possessions, one confessing and implicating the other. But as Harmon dug deeper into the case files, questions multiplied. The bullet recovered from James Jordan's body didn't match the type of gun prosecutors claimed Green had used. The blood evidence in the car showed patterns inconsistent with someone being shot while sitting in the driver's seat. And most troublingly, the initial coroner's report noted no water in James Jordan's lungs. Strange for a body supposedly dumped in a creek while the victim was still alive, as Demery had claimed. "This case isn't as simple as they're making it out to be," Harmon told her investigator. "I need to know what really happened that night." As the trial date approached, the story of James Jordan's murder seemed clear to the public. A random act of violence, a robbery gone wrong. But beneath the surface, questions were beginning to bubble up. Questions that would eventually reach Michael Jordan himself, shaking the foundation of everything he thought he knew about his father's death. Sati, funeral service for James Jordan became more than a family goodbye. It transformed into a national event of mourning. Rockfish AME Church in Teachey, North Carolina, couldn't contain the crowds that gathered on that humid August morning. Hundreds stood outside, listening to the service through speakers hastily set up on the church lawn. Inside, the small church was filled with famous faces. The entire Chicago Bulls organization had flown in: players, coaches, staff. NBA Commissioner David Stern sat solemnly in a middle pew. Even rivals like Patrick Ewing and Charles Barkley came to pay their respects. "This isn't about basketball," Barkley told reporters outside. "This is about supporting a friend who lost his father in the worst way possible." Michael sat in the front row between his mother and his wife Juanita. His face revealed nothing, the same stoic mask he'd worn since the news broke. Only those closest to him knew how deeply he was suffering. When it was Michael's turn to speak, he approached the pulpit slowly. The church fell silent as he adjusted the microphone. For a moment, he just stood there, gathering himself. "My father was the best man I've ever known," Michael began, his deep voice steady despite the emotion behind his words. "He taught me what it means to care for your family, to work hard, to keep your word." His voice cracked slightly as he continued. "Everyone sees me dunk a basketball and thinks that's my gift. But my real gift was having James Jordan as my father for 30 years. He showed me how to be a man, how to be a father myself someday." In the audience, Scottie Pippen wiped tears from his eyes. Phil Jackson sat with his head bowed. "My dad never missed a game," Michael said. "From Pee Wee League to the NBA Finals, he was there. Now I have to learn how to play without looking up and seeing him in the stands." As Michael returned to his seat, a gospel choir began singing "Amazing Grace." The powerful voices filled the small church as mourners dabbed at their eyes. Outside the church, in Wilmington, where James had raised his family, flags flew at half-staff. The community that had watched Michael grow from a skinny high school kid to a global superstar now mourned with him. At Michael's old high school, Coach Clifton "Pop" Herring spoke to reporters about James Jordan's impact. James wasn't just Michael's father. He was a father figure to a lot of kids around here, Herring said. He'd drive the team bus, help with equipment, stay late to work, with kids who needed extra help. He believed in hard work and discipline, but he did it with love. After the service, the Jordan family made their way through the crowd to waiting cars. Michael held his mother's arm, shielding her from cameras and well-wishers. His siblings formed a protective circle around them. The procession to the cemetery stretched for miles. People lined the roads, holding signs of support and wiping away tears as the hearse passed. "It's like we all lost someone," said Marvin Thomas, a local barber who had known the Jordan family for years. James was proud of Michael, sure, but he was the same good man before his son got famous. Never changed, never put on airs. At the graveside, the family gathered for a private service. Michael placed a single rose on his father's casket before it was lowered into the ground. Later that evening, back at the family home, Michael sat alone on the back porch, staring at the old basketball hoop his father had installed decades earlier. The net was tattered now, the backboard weathered by years of North Carolina sun and rain. Scottie Pippen found him there, sitting silently in the gathering darkness. "I don't know what to say, Mike," Pippen admitted, taking a seat beside his teammate. "There's nothing anyone can say to make this better." "He was so proud that night," Michael said softly. After the finals, in the locker room. He kept telling everyone, "That's my son." He had every right to be proud. Pippen replied, "You made him proud every day." "Did I?" Michael asked, his voice barely audible. "I've been thinking about all the games I missed with him because I was busy, all the calls I didn't return because I was tired, all the times I took him for granted, thinking there would always be more time." "That's not how he saw it," Pippen assured him. "James talked about you nonstop. You were his world, Mike." As darkness fell completely, Michael made a decision. Basketball had been his life, his identity, but it had also taken time away from his family. Time he couldn't get back. "I think I'm done, Scotty," he said quietly. "With basketball, I can't do it anymore." "Because of your dad? Because without him there to see it? What's the point?" Michael's voice was hollow. "Every time I step on the court, I'll be looking for him in the stands, and he won't be there." The news wouldn't become public for another month, but Michael Jordan, at the peak of his powers, had decided to walk away from the game that made him famous. Back in Robeson County, as the Jordan family mourned, the investigation continued. The arrests had been made, the case was progressing toward trial, but Deputy Williams couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important, something that might explain why James Jordan had really died on that lonely stretch of highway. The nation mourned a father taken too soon in a senseless act of violence, but beneath the simple narrative of a robbery gone wrong lay deeper, darker questions that would take years to surface, questions that would eventually lead back to Michael Jordan himself, and secrets his father might have taken to the grave. On Fiyutnin, October 6, 1993, the NBA world stood stunned as reporters gathered at the Chicago Bulls training facility in Deerfield, Illinois. The team's publicist had called an emergency press conference, giving no details about the subject. Rumors swirled through the crowd. Most assumed it would be about the upcoming season, perhaps a trade or a new signing. Nobody was prepared for what came next. Michael Jordan entered the room, dressed impeccably in a brown suit. He was flanked by Bulls owner Jerry Reinsdorf and general manager Jerry Krause. The usual confidence in Michael's walk was missing. He looked tired, his eyes lacking their competitive fire. "I appreciate everyone coming on such short notice," Michael began, his voice surprisingly soft for a man who commanded such presence. "After much thought and consideration, I've decided to retire from the game of basketball." A collective gasp filled the room, followed by the frantic clicking of cameras. Reporters who had covered Jordan's entire career looked at each other in disbelief. "Why?" someone finally shouted. Michael took a deep breath. "I've been playing basketball non-stop since I was in college. I've achieved everything I set out to do. I have no more challenges that motivate me." It was what he said next that connected the dots for everyone. "The most important factor in my decision was the loss of my father this summer. He was my biggest fan and my best friend. Without him, the desire is just not there." Questions flew at Michael from every direction. Is this because of gambling? Allegations? Will you come back if the Bulls struggle? "What will you do now?" Michael answered calmly, rejecting rumors about gambling problems forcing him out of the league. When asked about his future plans, he offered a hint of a smile. "I've always wanted to play baseball. Maybe I'll give that a try." Few took this comment seriously. Michael Jordan was the greatest basketball player on the planet, at the peak of his powers. He had just led the Bulls to their third consecutive championship. Athletes didn't walk away at age 30 unless injuries forced them out, but those closest to Michael weren't surprised. He's been different since his dad died. Bulls teammate Horace Grant told reporters after the announcement. Basketball just doesn't seem to matter to him the same way. Coach Phil Jackson, known for his spiritual approach to basketball, understood better than most. Michael needs to heal, Jackson explained. Some wounds can't be fixed by playing games. Back at his Chicago mansion, Michael sat alone after the press conference, ignoring the ringing phones and knocks at the door. In his hand, he held the I baseball his father had given him as a child. "I meant it, Pops," he whispered. "I'm going to try baseball. For you." While the sports world debated whether Jordan was truly retiring or just taking a break, a quieter conversation was happening in the Jordan family. "Do you really think this is about Dad?" Michael's brother Larry asked their mother after the announcement. Dolores Jordan sighed. "It's about James, yes. But it's also about Michael needing space to figure things out. The spotlight has been on him for so long." "The trial is coming up," Larry noted. "Maybe he doesn't want to be playing while those boys are in court for killing." "Dad!" The thought had occurred to Dolores, too. The preliminary hearings for Daniel Green and Larry Demery were scheduled to begin in November. Michael would likely be called to testify. "He blames himself," Dolores said softly, "for not being there, for being so famous that his father became a target." "But the police said it was random," Larry protested. "They didn't even know who Dad was." Dolores just shook her head. Michael had shared his doubts with her. Doubts about the official story, about the coincidence of his father being killed by strangers on a random highway. 3 weeks after his retirement announcement, Michael Jordan shocked the sports world, again by signing a minor league contract with the Chicago White Sox organization, another team owned by Jerry Reinsdorf. "Michael Jordan is serious about baseball," Reinsdorf told the press. "He's willing to start at the bottom and work his way up. That shows the kind of character he has." Critics called it a publicity stunt. Some felt Jordan was disrespecting baseball by thinking he could switch sports at an elite level. Others saw it as a rich man's midlife crisis, only those closest to. Michael understood the truth. Baseball had been James Jordan's first love, the sport he had most wanted his son to play. Now, wearing a Birmingham Barons uniform instead of Chicago Bulls red, Michael was honoring his father in the most personal way he could. As spring training began in 1994, Michael struggled. His swing was awkward, his timing off. Baseball, turned out, wasn't as easy as basketball had been for him, but he worked harder than anyone else, arriving early and staying late, his famous work ethic on full display. "It's not about being the best," he told reporters after a difficult practice. "It's about the journey. My father taught me that." Back in North Carolina, the legal process moved forward. Daniel Green maintained his innocence, while Larry Demery prepared to testify against him. The evidence seemed overwhelming, but defense, attorney Rachel Harmon, continued to find inconsistencies in the prosecution's case. As Michael Jordan chased his father's baseball dream in Birmingham, the questions about James Jordan's death remained unanswered. What had really happened that July night? Why had James pulled over on that lonely stretch of highway? And what secrets might he have taken to the grave? Secrets that would eventually force his famous son to confront a painful truth about the father he thought he knew. The Robeson County Courthouse buzzed with tension on a crisp February morning in 1996. After numerous delays, the trial of Daniel Green for the murder of James Jordan was finally beginning. Television trucks lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching skyward like mechanical sunflowers. Inside, the small courtroom couldn't accommodate all who wanted to attend. Journalists jostled for the limited seats, while curious locals formed a line that stretched around the block. Michael Jordan wasn't there. His family had convinced him to stay away. to avoid turning the proceedings into more of a circus than they already were. But his presence loomed over everything, the famous son of the man whose life had been taken. District. Attorney Johnson Ellis rose to deliver his opening statement, his southern drawl filling the hushed courtroom. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, "this case is about a heinous crime. The senseless murder of James Jordan, a man who was simply trying to get home to his family after attending a funeral." Ellis laid out the prosecution's theory. On July 23, 1993, Daniel Green and Larry Demery had spotted James Jordan's red Lexus parked on the highway shoulder. Seeing an opportunity to steal a luxury car, they approached. When they discovered James sleeping inside, Green shot him through the window, killing him instantly. These two young men then stole Mr. Jordan's car, his wallet, his championship ring, gifts from his famous son, and his very dignity, dumping his body in a creek like garbage, Ellis concluded. Defense attorney Rachel Harmon presented a very different story in her opening. "The state's case depends entirely on the word of Larry Demery," she told the jury, her voice steady and clear. "A young man who has every reason to lie to save himself from a life sentence." According to Harmon, Demery had killed James Jordan during a drug deal gone wrong, then convinced his friend Green to help dispose of the body. Green, she argued, had only become involved after the murder, making him guilty of crimes, yes, but not of killing James Jordan. "The evidence will show inconsistencies in the state's theory," Harmon promised. "Inconsistencies that raise serious questions about what really happened that night." Larry Demery was the prosecution's star witness. Having accepted a plea deal in exchange for his testimony, he took the stand on the trial's second day. He looked younger than his 21 years, his slender frame lost in an oversized suit, his voice barely audible until the judge asked him to speak up. "We were just looking to rob somebody," Demery testified, avoiding Green's gaze from the defense table. "When we saw the nice car, we didn't know who was inside." Demery claimed that as they approached, Green suddenly pulled out a .38 caliber pistol and shot Jordan through the car window. According to Demery, they only realized who they had killed when they checked the victim's ID. Daniel started freaking out, saying, "Man, we killed Michael Jordan's daddy," Demery testified, his voice breaking. During cross-examination, Harmon attacked Demery's credibility, pointing out his multiple conflicting statements to police and the suspicious timing of his plea deal. "Isn't it true that you changed your story after prosecutors offered to reduce your sentence?" Harmon asked. "I'm telling the truth now," Demery insisted. "Just like you were telling the truth in your first statement when you said you weren't involved at all?" Harmon countered. The forensic evidence presented challenges for both sides. The bullet recovered from James Jordan's body was so damaged that experts couldn't conclusively match it to the gun found in Green's home. The blood evidence in the car was minimal, unusual for a shooting inside a vehicle. Most damaging to Green was the video showing him wearing Jordan's championship ring and watch, dancing and rapping about having just killed somebody. "This is not the behavior of an innocent man," the prosecutor told the jury, playing the video repeatedly throughout the trial. But Harmon had questions the prosecution couldn't easily answer. Why were there no powder burns on James Jordan's shirt, if he was shot at close range? Why did the medical examiner's initial report indicate Jordan had been killed elsewhere, not in his car, as Demery claimed? The state has constructed a narrative to fit their preferred suspect, Harmon argued in her closing statement. But the evidence tells a different, more complicated story, one that does not point to Daniel Green as the killer. After 7 days of testimony, the case went to the jury. They deliberated for just 5 hours before returning with their verdict. On the charge of first-degree murder, we find the defendant, Daniel Green, guilty. Green showed no emotion as the verdict was read. In the gallery, his mother Ebony collapsed in tears, crying out, "My son didn't kill that man." At sentencing, Green maintained his innocence. "I am sorry for what happened to Mr. Jordan," he told the court. "But I did not kill him. Larry Demery killed him, and I helped cover it up. That was wrong, and I deserve punishment for that. But I am not a murderer." The judge was unmoved, sentencing Green to life imprisonment plus 10 years. Demery, for his cooperation, received a lesser sentence of life, with possibility of parole. In Chicago, Michael Jordan watched the news of the verdict, alone in his home office. The Bulls had welcomed him back in March 1995 after his baseball experiment had ended. Now, wearing number 45 instead of his famous 23, he was rebuilding his basketball career. The phone rang. It was Deputy Marcus Williams from Robeson County. "Mr. Peter, Jordan, I thought you'd want to know personally," Williams said. "Daniel Green was found guilty on all counts." "So it's over," Michael replied, his voice flat. "The legal process is over," Williams agreed. "But I want you to know I'm still looking into some aspects of the case. There are questions I can't answer yet." Michael was silent for a moment. "What kind of questions?" "Just loose ends," Williams assured him. "Nothing that changes the bottom line. Green and Demery killed your father. We got the right guys. I just like to be thorough." After hanging up, Michael stared at the championship trophies lining his office wall. Basketball had been his escape since returning from retirement, a way to channel his grief and anger into something productive. The Bulls were building toward another championship run, and his focus needed to be there, not on the past. But as he turned away from the phone, a nagging doubt remained. Something about the case had never felt right to him. The randomness of it, the coincidence of his father being targeted, the inconsistencies in the evidence that Harmon had highlighted during the trial. What had his father been doing on that highway? Why had he pulled over to sleep instead of getting a hotel room, which he could easily afford? And why had Deputy Williams mentioned loose ends? If the case was truly solved, questions Michael pushed aside as he prepared for the next game, unaware that years later, those same questions would resurface with new evidence that would shake his understanding of his father's death and perhaps of his father himself. The spring of 1996 brought renewal to Chicago. The city buzzed with excitement as Michael Jordan led the Bulls toward another championship. With his famous number 23 jersey back, Michael seemed to have recaptured his old magic, scoring more, jumping higher, winning more decisively than before his retirement. "He's playing angry," teammate Steve Kerr told reporters after a particularly dominant performance against the Knicks. "It's like he's got something to prove." What fans didn't see were the quiet moments when basketball couldn't distract Michael from his grief. In hotel rooms on road trips, he would sometimes call his mother, just to hear stories about his father. "Tell me about when Dad coached my Little League team," he'd ask Dolores, wanting to preserve every memory. The Bulls stormed through the regular season, setting an NBA record with 72 wins and just 10 losses. By June, they were back in the NBA Finals against the Seattle Supersonics. Michael was unstoppable, earning his fourth Finals MVP award as Chicago claimed its fourth championship. When the final buzzer sounded on Father's Day 1996, Michael collapsed onto the court, sobbing uncontrollably as teammates tried to console him. The cameras caught his raw emotion as he clutched the game ball, rocking back and forth. In the locker room, away from cameras, he explained to Coach Phil Jackson, "This one was for him. I just wish he could have seen it." Later, in his post-game press conference, a reporter asked about the emotional moment on the court. "It's been a long journey back," Michael said, his eyes still red. "It was Father's Day, and I know he was watching. I know he's proud." He didn't mention that every game, before stepping onto the court, he touched the small photo of James he kept in his wallet, a private ritual that connected him to his father. Meanwhile, in a North Carolina prison, Daniel Green began serving, his life sentence still maintaining his innocence. His appeals were rejected one by one, despite new questions raised by his defense team about the evidence and investigation. Larry Demery, having secured a lighter sentence through his testimony, kept a low profile in prison. Occasionally, he would speak to reporters, always sticking to his story about Green pulling the trigger. But those who interviewed him noted how his eyes wouldn't meet theirs when discussing certain details of that night. Deputy Marcus Williams had been promoted to detective, but he couldn't let go of the Jordan case. On weekends, he would review the file, making notes of inconsistencies and unanswered questions. Why had James Jordan's body shown no signs of a struggle? Why was there so little blood in the car if he'd been shot while sitting in it? And most troublingly, why had the coroner's initial time of death estimate been changed to match the prosecution's timeline? Williams kept his concerns private. The case was officially closed. Green and Demery had been convicted. The Jordan family had closure. Reopening old wounds would serve no purpose, at least not yet. In Chicago, Michael focused on basketball, leading the Bulls to another championship in 1997. After each victory, he would point to the sky, a gesture fans interpreted as acknowledging his father. "My dad's my motivation," he told a reporter who asked about the gesture. "Everything I do on the court, I do thinking about what he taught me." The public embraced this narrative, the son honoring his murdered father through athletic excellence. It was a story of tragedy transformed into triumph, of overcoming adversity through determination and grit. Pure Michael Jordan. What remained? Hidden was Michael's occasional doubt, moments when he wondered about the loose ends in his father's case. Late at night, he would sometimes reread newspaper clippings about the trial, noting the inconsistencies defense attorney Rachel Harmon had highlighted. Once, after a game in Charlotte, he had driven to Lumberton, parking near the spot where his father's car had been found on the highway shoulder. He sat there for hours, trying to imagine his father's final moments, trying to make sense of the senseless. "Why there, Dad?" he whispered. "Why did you stop there?" During the 1998 season, as the Bulls pushed for their 6th championship under Michael's leadership, an envelope arrived at his Chicago office. Inside was a letter from Daniel Green, still proclaiming his innocence. "Mr. Jordan," it began, "I know you have no reason to believe me, but I swear to you I did not kill your father. I helped cover up his death, and for that I am deeply sorry. But there is more to the story than what came out at trial. Your father deserves the truth. So do you." Michael never responded. The letter ended up in a drawer, filed away with other painful reminders of his loss. The Bulls won their 6th championship that June, and Michael retired again, this time seemingly for good. Life moved on. Michael became majority owner of the Charlotte Bobcats, later the Hornets, bringing professional basketball back to his home state. He married again, had more children, built a business empire. His father's murder receded into the background, a tragedy from the past, a wound that had scarred over. Until 2018, when investigative reporter Tanner Reed reached out, with questions that would reopen everything. "Mr. Jordan," Reed's email began, "I've been reviewing the evidence in your father's case, and I've found troubling inconsistencies. Would you be willing to discuss them?" Attached to the email was a photo, James Jordan's championship ring, the one he had been wearing when he disappeared. The one that had supposedly been recovered from Daniel Green. Except this ring looked different from the one shown at trial. The engraving was wrong. The diamonds were arranged differently. For the first time in years, Michael felt the ground shift beneath him. If the ring wasn't the same, what else might be wrong about the case? What other truths might have been buried with his father? 25 years after James Jordan's death, the questions his son had pushed aside were about to demand answers. Answers that would challenge everything Michael thought he knew about the father he had loved and lost. Tanner Reed wasn't a famous journalist. A former sports reporter for the Charlotte Observer, he had pivoted to investigative work after growing tired of locker room interviews and game recaps. His small office in downtown Charlotte was cluttered with papers, coffee cups, and basketball memorabilia, including a framed Michael Jordan rookie card. It was 2018, 25 years since James Jordan's murder, when Reed began looking into the case. What started as research for an anniversary article quickly became something more complex. "Something doesn't add up," Reed told his editor, sliding a folder across the desk. "The official story has holes you could drive a truck through." Reed had spent months reviewing court transcripts, police reports, and medical examiner documents. He'd interviewed former jurors, forensic experts, and even a retired bailiff who had worked during Green's trial. Each conversation added to his doubts. "Look at the blood evidence," Reed explained, pointing to coroner's photos. "If Jordan was shot while sitting in his car, there should have been more blood on the driver's seat. Instead, there are just small stains, consistent with a body being placed there after death, not someone being shot there." More troubling was the bullet evidence. The medical examiner had recovered a .38 caliber bullet from James Jordan's body. Yet, ballistic tests couldn't match it to the gun prosecutors claimed Green had used. "They built their case around DeMary's testimony," Reed said, "but the physical evidence tells a different story." When Reed's first article was published, "Questions remain in James Jordan murder case," few paid attention. But former detective Marcus Williams, now retired and running a security firm in Fayetteville, reached out immediately. "I've been waiting for someone to ask these questions," Williams told Reed when they met at a quiet diner off Highway 301. "I couldn't pursue them officially. The department considered the case closed." Williams shared his own file on the case. Notes, photos, and interviews never entered into evidence. Together, they identified key inconsistencies. James Jordan's body showed no defensive wounds, suggesting he may have known his killer or been killed while sleeping. The car's position on the highway made little sense. Why would James pull over in such a remote, dangerous area when there was a rest stop just 2 miles ahead? Phone records showed James making a call at 1:30 a.m., nearly 3 hours after prosecutors claimed he was murdered. Most significantly, several items were missing from the crime scene inventory, including James's personal address book and a briefcase witnesses had seen him carrying earlier that day. "What was in the briefcase?" Reed asked. Williams shook his head. "That's what I've been wondering for 25 years." Reed's investigation took an unexpected turn when he interviewed Barbara Sullivan, a juror from Green's trial. "They never told us about the inconsistencies in the medical report," Sullivan said, her voice shaking with emotion. "We were shown a body found in water, told he was killed in his car, and expected not to question it. I've lived with this guilt for years, wondering if we convicted the right person." Similar conversations with other jurors revealed a pattern. Key evidence had been withheld. Alternative theories had been dismissed. The jury had seen only what prosecutors wanted them to see. Reed's breakthrough came when he located Cameron Phillips, a former employee at the Fairmont gas station where James Jordan had stopped on his final night. Phillips remembered James clearly. The red Lexus, the bull's cap, the championship ring. He wasn't alone, Phillips revealed, contradicting the official narrative. There was a man with him, white guy, business suit. They seemed tense, arguing about something. Mr. Jordan bought coffee, made a phone call from the payphone. Then, they drove off together. This mystery man had never been mentioned in police reports or at trial. When Reed checked phone records for the gas station payphone, he found a call placed to a Charlotte number at 11:45 p.m., a number belonging to a sports management company with gambling connections. Armed with these findings, Reed approached legal experts, including Northwestern University's Center on Wrongful Convictions. Their assessment was troubling. Daniel Green had likely been convicted using flawed evidence and incomplete testimony. The prosecution's timeline doesn't match the medical evidence, explained forensic pathologist Dr. Eleanor Chen after reviewing the autopsy report. Based on body decomposition, James Jordan died closer to midnight on July 23rd, not 2:30 a.m. as claimed at trial. And the bullet entry wound is inconsistent with someone being shot through a car window. When Reed published his findings in a comprehensive, 5-part series, the story exploded. National media outlets picked it up. Legal advocacy groups called for a review of the case. Daniel Green's attorneys filed for a new hearing based on the revealed evidence. For Michael Jordan, the revelations came like body blows, each new detail challenging what he had accepted as truth for 25 years. The final piece of Reed's Twice investigation hit closest to home. Financial records showed James Jordan had made several large cash deposits in the months before his death. Deposits that couldn't be explained by his known income sources. He had also met repeatedly with individuals connected to sports gambling operations in Charlotte and Atlantic City. These meetings coincided with the most controversial period of Michael's career, when rumors of his gambling habits had reached their peak, with some suggesting his first retirement had been a secret suspension related to gambling debts. Had James been involved somehow? Was his murder truly random or connected to something deeper? The question haunted Michael as he sat in his Charlotte office, staring at Reed's email and the attached photo of the championship ring, a ring that didn't match the one shown at the trial, raising the disturbing possibility that evidence had been falsified. For 25 years, Michael had clung to the official story. His father, killed by chance in a random robbery. It was tragic, but comprehensible. The alternative, that James had been deliberately targeted, perhaps because of connections to gambling or other activities, was too painful to consider. But now, as Reed's evidence mounted, Michael faced a terrible choice: continue accepting a comfortable lie, or seek a truth that might forever change how he remembered his father. His finger hovered over his phone. Marcus Williams's number was still in his contacts after all these years. One call could start him down a path from which there would be no return. "I'm sorry, Dad," Michael whispered, "but I need to know." He pressed the call button, unaware that what he would discover would reveal not just the truth about his father's death, but secrets about James Jordan's life that his famous son had never suspected. Former Detective Marcus Williams answered on the third ring. "This is Williams. It's Michael Jordan." A pause. "Mr. Jordan, I've been expecting your call." They met the next morning at a private room in a Charlotte hotel. Michael arrived wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap pulled low, avoiding recognition. Williams brought 2 large file boxes. "Everything I've collected over the years," Williams explained, setting them on the table. "Official reports, interviews that never made it to trial, photos, notes, my personal investigation." Michael stared at the boxes. Why? The case was closed. The killers were convicted. "Because things didn't add up," Williams said simply. "And your father deserved better than unanswered questions." Michael nodded slowly, then asked the question that had haunted him since reading Reed's investigation. "Was my father involved in something? Something illegal?" Williams hesitated. "I can't say for certain, but there were financial activities that raised questions." He pulled out bank statements showing cash deposits to James Jordan's account, $15,000 here, $22,000 there. No clear source. No explanation. "Your father made 9 deposits totaling over $100,000 in the 3 months before his death," Williams explained. Money that couldn't be traced to his legitimate business ventures. Michael's stomach tightened. His father had owned a small factory management company. Nothing that would generate that kind of cash. "What else?" Michael asked, his voice barely audible. Williams produced phone records showing calls between James Jordan and several numbers in Atlantic City and Las Vegas, cities known for their casinos. These calls increased in frequency during the 1993 NBA playoffs, Williams noted, particularly after games where point spreads weren't covered. Michael felt the blood drain from his face. The 1993 playoffs, when rumors about his gambling had reached their peak, when he'd been accused of staying up all night at casinos between crucial games, when sports columnists had questioned whether his gambling habits were affecting his play. "Are you suggesting my father was—" "What? Placing bets for me?" Williams shook his head. "I don't know, but he was in contact with known bookmakers. That's fact, not speculation." The next document hit Michael like a physical blow. A photograph of his father at an Atlantic City casino, sitting with a man Michael recognized. Thomas Caruso, a notorious sports gambler who had been banned from NBA arenas after attempting to befriend players. "This was taken 2 weeks before your father died," Williams said quietly. Michael pushed back from the table, his mind racing. The timeline aligned with his worst gambling period, when he'd been losing heavily, when the media had been questioning his habits, when NBA Commissioner David Stern had reportedly warned him about his associations. Had his father been trying to help? To pay off debts? To protect his son's reputation? "There's more," Williams continued. "Your father's day planner, the one never entered into evidence at trial. It showed a meeting scheduled for July 24, 1993, with David Stern in New York, the day after James was killed. A meeting that never happened." "Why would my father be meeting with Stern?" Michael asked, though part of him already knew the answer. Williams didn't respond directly. Instead, he handed Michael a transcript of a voicemail James had left for Michael's agent, David Falk, 3 days before his death. "David, it's James Jordan. We need to talk about Michael's situation. I think I've found a solution, but I need your help with the commissioner. Call me back." Michael closed his eyes, pieces falling into place. Summer 1993, when rumors had swirled that his first retirement wasn't voluntary, but a secret suspension for gambling. Rumors the NBA had vehemently denied. Rumors that had seemed outlandish. Until now. "My father was trying to fix my problems," Michael said softly. "It appears so," Williams agreed. "And he may have gotten in over his head." They spent the next 6 hours reviewing evidence. The work calmed Michael, allowing him to process the revelations through methodical examination of facts rather than emotion. The most troubling discovery came in a report Williams had filed but superiors had dismissed. Blood evidence in James's car showed he had died elsewhere, his body later placed in the driver's seat. The killers had then driven the car to the creek, dumped the body, and abandoned the vehicle miles away. If Demery and Green were just random carjackers, why the elaborate staging? Williams asked. Why not leave the body where they killed him? Another document revealed James had withdrawn $40,000 from his account the day before his death. Money never recovered. Money never mentioned at trial. He was carrying cash that night, Williams confirmed. A lot of it. By evening, Michael had a clearer, if more disturbing, picture. His father may have been meeting someone that night, someone connected to Michael's gambling issues. The meeting had gone wrong. James had been killed, not in a random robbery, but in something planned. The carjacking narrative had been manufactured afterward. But why frame Green and Demery? Michael asked. I don't think they were framed, Williams clarified. I think they were involved, but not as the masterminds. They were either hired to do it or were convenient scapegoats who stumbled into the situation afterward. The final piece came from the mysterious briefcase witnesses had seen James carrying earlier that day. A briefcase never recovered, never mentioned in police reports. What do you think was in it? Michael asked. Money? Maybe documents. Whatever your father was bringing to that meeting, Williams suggested. Whatever it was, someone wanted it badly enough to kill for it. As Michael prepared to leave, Williams handed him a sealed envelope. This came to me anonymously last year. I've never shown it to anyone else. Inside was a single Polaroid photograph. James Jordan's missing championship ring, the real one, not the one presented at trial, sitting atop a newspaper dated July 24, 1993, the day after his murder. Scrawled across the bottom in black marker. Some questions are better left unanswered. Michael stared at the photo, a chill running through him. Who sent this? I don't know, Williams admitted. But whoever they are, they're sending a message. They're still out there, and they know we're looking. Michael slipped the photo into his pocket, his mind made up. I need to talk to Larry Demery, he said. He knows more than he testified to. Williams nodded slowly. I can arrange it, but be prepared. The truth might be worse than not knowing. As Michael walked to his car, his phone buzzed with a text from his wife. Everything okay? He couldn't answer truthfully. Nothing was okay. His father, his hero, his rock, had been leading a double life, trying to protect his son from his own mistakes. And that attempt at protection had likely cost James his life. For 25 years, Michael had pointed to the sky after victories, honoring the father he thought he knew. Now he wondered if he had known James Jordan at all. Visiting the Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina, was a surreal experience for Michael Jordan. Guards and inmates alike did double takes as he walked through security, but the warden had arranged for privacy. No one would know about this visit. Not the press, not Michael's family, not even his closest friends. Larry Demery had aged in the 25 years since James Jordan's murder. His once youthful face now bore deep lines, his hair graying at the temples. When he entered the small interview room and saw Michael, his eyes widened in shock. I didn't believe them when they said you wanted to see me, Demery said, his voice barely above a whisper. Michael studied the man who had testified to witnessing his father's murder. It was strange. He'd thought about Demery for years, imagined, confronting him, even dreamed about him. But sitting across from him now, Michael felt oddly calm. I need to know the truth, Michael said simply. Not what you said at trial. What really happened that night. Demery's eyes darted nervously to the security camera in the corner of the room. That camera's off, Michael assured him. No recording, just us talking. Why now? Demery asked. After all these years? Because someone sent me this. Michael slid the photo of his father's championship ring across the table. The real ring, not the one shown at your trial. Demery stared at the photo, his hands trembling slightly. Where did... You get this? That's not important. What matters is what it means. That evidence was falsified. That the story you told on the stand wasn't true. Silence filled the room as Demery seemed to wrestle with himself. Finally, he spoke. I didn't lie about everything, he said. Daniel and I were there that night. We did take your father's car, but it wasn't like I said at trial. Then what was it like? Demery took a deep breath. We were working for someone, a man named Victor Gutierrez. He ran numbers for bookies in Charlotte, handled collections. Daniel and I did odd jobs for him, deliveries, sometimes muscle when people wouldn't pay. Michael leaned forward. What? Did this have to do with my father? Gutierrez told us to meet him on Highway 74 that night. Said there was a job. Just intimidation. Scaring someone who owed money. When we got there, your father's car was already pulled over. Gutierrez was talking to him through the window. Demery's voice grew quieter. Things got heated. Your father kept saying he'd taken care of it, that there was no need for threats. Then Gutierrez pulled a gun. Michael's hands clenched into fists under the table. And then it happened fast. Your father tried to drive away. Gutierrez shot him, once in the chest. Demery's eyes filled with tears. We panicked. Gutierrez told us to help him or we'd be next. So we helped move the body to the trunk, drove to the creek, dumped him there. And the car? Gutierrez told us to clean it out, take anything valuable, then abandon it. Said it would look like a robbery that way. Demery paused. He kept a briefcase that was in the car, wouldn't let us see what was inside. Michael thought of the cash his father had withdrawn, $40,000 that had never been recovered. Money to resolve whatever gambling situation Michael had gotten himself into. Why didn't you tell this story at trial? Demery's laugh was hollow. Who would believe us? Two black kids from the wrong side of Lumberton against a respected businessman? Besides, Gutierrez made it clear what would happen to our families if we talked. So you let Daniel take the fall, Michael said, disgust evident in his voice. I was scared, Demery admitted, shame crossing his face. The DA offered me a deal. Testify against Daniel. Get a lighter sentence. I took it. And now? Are you still scared? Demery met Michael's gaze directly for the first time. I've got cancer. Doctors give me 6 months, maybe less. I'm beyond fear now. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket and slid it across the table. I filed this with the court last week. A recantation of parts of my testimony. Not the whole truth, I'm still not that brave, but enough to raise questions. Michael unfolded the document. It was a sworn affidavit challenging key elements of Demery's trial testimony. The timeline, the murder weapon, who pulled the trigger. I can't bring your father back, Demery said softly. But maybe I can set some things right before I go. This Victor Gutierrez, Michael said. Where is he now? Dead. Car accident in 1998. Convenient, huh? Demery shook his head. But he didn't act alone. He worked for people with connections, people who knew about your gambling, who maybe used your father to send a message. Michael stood, unable to sit still any longer. Why would they target my father and not me? What better way to hurt someone like you? Take away the person you love most. Demery hesitated. There's something else. Something I've never told anyone. What? Your father recognized me that night. Not by name, but he'd seen me before. At A basketball tournament in Wilmington when you were in high school. I was playing for the opposing team. Michael remembered. A Christmas tournament his senior year. His father had never missed a game. He looked at me that night by the highway and said, "I know you. You're better than this." Even with a gun pointed at him, he was trying to reach me. Demery's voice broke. I've thought about those words every day for 25 years. As Michael prepared to leave, Demery called after him. "Jordan, there was a ring, a championship ring. The real one, not what they showed at trial. Gutierrez took it that night. And the one used as evidence? A fake. The police were desperate to close the case." Demery shrugged. "People believe what they want to believe. Everyone wanted it to be a simple carjacking by two black kids. Easier that way." Outside the prison, Michael sat in his car, processing what he'd learned. His father hadn't been randomly chosen. He'd been targeted because of Michael's gambling, debts, associations, maybe threats made. James had been trying to fix his son's mistakes and paid with his life. The realization was devastating. For years, Michael had lived with guilt about his father's death, guilt about the car he'd given him, about the fame that had made James a target. But this was worse. This made him directly responsible. His phone buzzed with a text from investigative reporter Tanner Reed. "Need to meet. Found Daniel Green. He's willing to talk. This goes deeper than we thought." Michael started the car, his decision made. He would follow this to the end, no matter how painful the truth might be. He owed his father that much. What he didn't know was that Daniel Green's story would reveal the final, most shocking piece of the puzzle, a connection between James Jordan and people Michael had trusted implicitly. People who might have orchestrated everything from the beginning. People who wouldn't want these secrets exposed, even 25 years later. The Birmingham Correctional Facility looked nothing like Central Prison. Where Raleigh's institution had been all concrete and steel, Birmingham's minimum security facility resembled a community college campus. Brick buildings, manicured lawns, even a small garden tended by inmates. Daniel Green had been transferred. Here 3 years earlier, after his security classification was downgraded. Now, 44, he worked in the prison library and was pursuing a degree in legal studies. When Michael Jordan walked into the visitor's room, Green showed none of Demery's shock or nervousness. "I've been waiting 25 years for this conversation," Green said, his voice steady. Tanner Reed sat beside Michael, recorder and notebook ready. The reporter had spent weeks building trust with Green, explaining Michael's quest for the truth about his father's death. "I need to hear your side," Michael said. "The full story, not the trial version." Green nodded. "First, let me say I'm sorry about your father. I didn't kill him, but I helped cover up his death. That was wrong, and I've had to live with it." "Larry Demery says a man named Victor Gutierrez pulled the trigger," Michael said. "That you and Larry were just there to help clean up." Green's expression hardened. "Gutierrez was there, yes, but he wasn't alone, and he wasn't in charge." "Who was?" "A man in a suit, expensive watch, gold pinky ring. He stayed in his car while everything went down. I only saw him briefly, but Larry recognized him." "Did this man have a name?" Reed asked. Green hesitated. "Larry wouldn't tell me at first, said it was safer not to know. But later, when we were arrested, he told me it was someone connected to the NBA, someone who handled problems for the Beats League." Michael felt a chill. "Richard Lombardi?" Green's eyes widened. "That's the name. How did you know?" Michael's mind raced. Lombardi had been the NBA's head of security in the 1990s. a former FBI agent known for his discretion and ruthless efficiency. He'd been the one who had supposedly investigated Michael's gambling, but found no evidence of wrongdoing. "Go on," Michael said, his voice tight. "Your father's car was already there when we arrived," Green explained. "Gutierrez had called us, said he needed help with a job. When we got there, the man, Lombardi, was talking to your father through the car window. It looked intense." Green's account matched DeMary's in some ways, but differed critically in others. According to Green, James Jordan hadn't been sleeping when approached. He'd been waiting, expecting to meet someone. The conversation had turned heated. Then Lombardi had nodded to Gutierrez, who pulled a gun. "Your father tried to drive away," Green said. "Gutierrez fired once through the window, hit him in the chest. And then Lombardi took a briefcase from your father's car, told us to make it look like a robbery. Take the car, the wallet, the jewelry. Dump the body somewhere far away. And you just did it? Helped cover up a murder?" Michael couldn't keep the disgust from his voice. "I was 19, scared and stupid," Green admitted. "Gutierrez said he'd kill my mother if I didn't help. Maybe that's just an excuse, but it felt real that night." Reed leaned forward. "Did you hear what they were arguing about before the shooting?" "Money. Your father kept saying, 'He's done with it. He's walking away.' Lombardi said something like, 'It's too late for that.'" Michael stood abruptly, pacing the small room. The timeline aligned perfectly with his decision to retire from basketball in October 1993, a decision he'd been contemplating even before his father's death, a decision his father had apparently known about. "The briefcase," Michael said. "Did you see what was in it?" "No, but it was heavy. Lombardi wouldn't let it out of his sight." Michael thought of the $40,000 his father had withdrawn, but a briefcase full of cash would weigh more than that. What else had James been carrying? "There's something else," Green said quietly. "Something that's bothered me for years. Your father's phone. It rang while we were moving him to the trunk. The caller ID said Michael." Michael froze. "What time was this?" "Around midnight. I remember because Gutierrez joked about it. Said it was ironic, you calling right then." Michael remembered that call. Unable to sleep in Chicago, he'd tried reaching his father to discuss his retirement plans. The call had gone to voicemail. He'd left a message. "Hey, Dad, let's talk tomorrow. I've made a decision about basketball." Had his father already been dead when he called? Or had James been alive, unable to answer because he was being held at gunpoint? The thought made Michael physically ill. "One last thing," Green said. "The championship ring. The one used as evidence at trial wasn't your father's real ring. The police knew it. The prosecutors knew it. But they needed something to connect me to the murder. Where's the real ring now? Lombardi took it that night. Said it was insurance." As Michael and Reed left the prison, neither spoke for several minutes. Finally, Reed broke the silence. "What does this mean? The NBA's head of security involved in your father's murder?" "It means someone wanted to send me a message," Michael said, his voice hollow. "Maybe about gambling, maybe about retiring. Either way, they used my father to do it." Back at his hotel, Michael called former Bulls security chief Clarence Gaines, one of the few people he still trusted from those days. "Clarence, what do you remember about Richard Lombardi?" Gaines was silent for a moment. "Why are you asking about him?" "Just refreshing my memory." "Lombardi was connected," Gaines said carefully. "FBI background, but rumors he had mob ties too. Stern's fixer. When players had problems, Lombardi made them disappear. Was he investigating My gambling in '93? Another pause. Officially? No. Unofficially. He was watching you closely. There was concern about your Atlantic City trips, the people you were associating with. Like my father? Gaines's sharp intake of breath was audible. Michael, where is this coming from? I need to know, Clarence. Was my father involved in my gambling issues? Your father was trying to protect you, Gaines finally admitted. He came to me in June '93, worried about debts you'd accumulated, people who were pressuring you. He wanted to handle it quietly, keep it from becoming a scandal. Why? Didn't you tell me this before? Your father asked me not to. Said you had enough pressure on you during the finals. After he died, it didn't seem relevant anymore. But it was relevant. It was everything. That night, Michael sat alone in his hotel room, the pieces finally coming together. His father, concerned about his gambling and the dangerous people around him, had tried to intervene. Perhaps he'd gathered evidence, records, names, threats, documentation that could have embarrassed the league or exposed connections between the NBA and organized crime. Evidence he'd been carrying in that briefcase. Michael had planned to retire anyway, tired of the pressure and needing new challenges, but his father had been killed before that announcement could be made. And afterward, the narrative had been carefully constructed. A random carjacking, 2 young black men as convenient villains, case closed. As dawn broke, Michael's phone chimed with a text message, unknown number. Check your email. In his inbox was a message with no text, just an attachment. Michael opened it with trembling fingers. It was a photo of his father's championship ring, the real one, sitting atop that day's newspaper. Below it, the same message from years before. Some questions are better left unanswered. Michael stared at the screen, understanding the threat, but beyond fear now. For 25 years, he'd lived with a lie, that his father's death was random, meaningless. The truth was worse, but also freeing. James Jordan had died trying to protect his son. Michael owed it to him to expose the truth, whatever the cost. He picked up his phone to call Tanner Reed. They had enough now. DeMary's recantation, Green's testimony, the financial records, the connection to Lombardi. Not proof, perhaps, but enough to reopen the case, to ask the questions that had been buried for too long. As he dialed, Michael glanced once more at the photograph of the ring and noticed something he'd missed. Reflected in its polished surface was the photographer. A face he recognized instantly. A face that changed everything he thought he knew about his father's death. A face that meant the real killer had been hiding in plain sight all along. Michael stared at the reflection in the ring's polished surface. The face looking back at him was one he'd known for decades, trusted, even considered family. Jerry Krause, the Chicago Bulls general manager. It made a terrible kind of sense. Krause had always resented the attention Michael received, had always been jealous of the close relationship between Michael and his father. More significantly, Krause had been desperate to rebuild the Bulls his way, to prove he could win without Michael. But would that jealousy extend to murder? It seemed impossible. Yet there was Krause's unmistakable jowly face reflected in the ring's surface. Michael's phone buzzed. Reed again. Jordan, I just got something big. A former secretary at the Bulls office claims Krause was meeting with Richard Lombardi regularly in 1993. Secret meetings, off the books. Jerry's involved, Michael said, his voice flat. He just sent me a photo of my father's ring. Silence on the line. Then, are you sure it's from Krause? His reflection is in the ring. He wanted me to know. Why now? After all these years? Michael had been asking himself the same question. Because we're getting close to the truth. Because Demary's dying and talking. Because there's finally a chance the real story might come out. What are you going to do? I need to see him. Face to face. Jordan, if Kraus was involved in your father's murder, he's dangerous. Let the police handle this. 25 years, and the police haven't done anything. This ends today. Michael hung up before Reed could argue further. He stared at the photo again, fury building inside him. If Kraus had orchestrated his father's death, or even just known about it and stayed silent, nothing in Michael's life had been what he thought. His phone rang again. Unknown number. Hello, Michael. Kraus's familiar voice, unchanged after all these years. I assume you got my message. Why? Michael demanded, the single word containing all his rage and confusion. We should talk in person. Your hotel room isn't secure. Fine. Where? The old practice facility in Deerfield. 1 hour. Come alone. I'll explain everything. Saturdaye's line went dead. Michael sat motionless for several minutes, processing. The Berto Center in Deerfield had been the Bulls' practice facility during the championship years. It was now mostly abandoned, awaiting redevelopment, empty, isolated, private. Perfect for a confession. Or a trap, Michael texted Reed. Meeting Kraus at Berto. If you don't hear from me in 2 hours, go to the police with everything. Then he grabbed his car keys and left. The Berto Center looked smaller than Michael remembered. The parking lot was empty except for a single black Lincoln, Kraus's trademark vehicle. Michael parked beside it and entered through the unlocked front door. The practice court was dim, lit only by emergency lights. The Bulls' logo at center court was faded but still visible. How many hours had he spent on this floor? How many championships had been built in this very room? Kraus sat on the bleachers, looking older and frailer than Michael remembered. At 77, the former GM's health had deteriorated, his once rotund frame now gaunt. Thanks for coming, Kraus said, his voice echoing in the empty gym. I didn't come for pleasantries, Michael replied, keeping his distance. You have my father's ring. You've had it all these years, Kraus nodded. Insurance, in case anyone ever looked too closely at what happened. So you admit it? You were involved in my father's murder? Not the way you think. Kraus sighed heavily. I didn't plan it. I didn't want it. But yes, I knew about it beforehand. I could have stopped it. And I didn't. The confirmation hit Michael like a physical blow. He leaned against the wall for support, his legs suddenly unsteady. Why? Because of what your father knew. Kraus reached into his jacket and removed a small USB drive. This contains copies of everything James had in that briefcase, the same files I've kept hidden for 25 years. Records of gambling operations connected to the NBA, players' shaving points, referees fixing games, owners laundering money through the league. Michael stared at the drive. My father had all this. He was gathering evidence. Not about your gambling. That was minor compared to what else was happening. James stumbled onto something much bigger while trying to help you. He found connections between NBA executives, team owners, and organized crime. And Lombardi? The enforcer. When the league had a problem, Lombardi solved it. Usually with bribes or threats, sometimes with worse. Michael thought of his father, principled and straightforward, discovering corruption at the highest levels of the sport his son loved. Of course, James would have tried to expose it. Did David Stern know? Kraus's expression darkened. Stern authorized the hit, Michael. Your father was meeting him the next day to hand over the evidence. Lombardi was sent to intercept him. The revelation staggered Michael. Stern had been like a father figure to him, stern but supportive, demanding but fair. The idea that the commissioner had ordered James Jordan's death seemed impossible. "I don't believe you," Michael said. "It's all on the drive, including Stern's." "Orders to Lombardi." Kraus coughed, a wet, racking sound. "I'm dying, Michael. Cancer. Same as Demery. I don't have long, and I can't take this to my grave." "Why tell me now? Why not 25 years ago?" Fear. Cowardice. Kraus shrugged weakly. "I told myself I was protecting the game, protecting the Bulls dynasty. But really, I was protecting myself." He held out the USB drive. "Everything your father died for is here. What you do with it is up to you." Michael approached cautiously, taking the drive. "Did you hate me that much, to let my father die?" "I never hated you, Michael. I envied you. There's a difference." Kraus's eyes were damp. "I created the greatest team in history. But you got all the credit. No one remembered the architect, just the centerpiece." "So, this was about your ego?" Michael's voice rose. "My father died because you wanted recognition?" "He died because he was going to expose corruption that would have destroyed the NBA. I just let it happen." Kraus looked down. "I've paid for it every day since." Michael's phone buzzed. A text from Reed. "Police found Demery dead in his cell. Suicide. Coming to Berto with backup. Don't do anything until we arrive." Kraus saw Michael's expression change. "Lombardi's tying up loose ends. Demery's dead, isn't he?" Michael nodded, slowly. "I'll be next," Kraus said, "unless you protect me in exchange for my testimony." The offer was so typical of Kraus, always looking for leverage, always making deals. Even now, with James Jordan's blood on his hands, he was negotiating. "You think I'd help you? After what you've done?" "I think you want the truth more than you want revenge," Kraus replied. "And I'm the only one who can give you that truth now." Michael heard sirens in the distance. Reed was coming with police. Soon, this would all be out of his hands. Evidence collected, statements taken, charges filed. If Kraus was telling the truth, the biggest scandal in sports history was about to break. But was the truth worth the cost? Exposing corruption at the highest levels of the NBA would tarnish the game Michael loved, the championships he'd won, the legacy he'd built. Everything would be questioned. Nothing would remain sacred. Yet his father had believed the truth was worth dying for. Michael looked at the USB drive in his hand, then at Kraus. "Time's running out," Kraus said. "What are you going to do?" The sirens grew louder as Michael made his decision, one that would either bring final justice for his father or bury the truth forever. Michael slipped the drive into his pocket. "I'm going to do what my father would have done. The truth comes out, no matter who it hurts." Sullivan's face fell. "You don't understand the forces you're dealing with. These people, they'll destroy everything you've built." "I don't care," Michael said simply. "My father died for this. He believed the truth was worth any price, even the legacy of the game you love, your championships, your reputation. None of that matters if it was built on lies." Michael stepped toward the door as the sirens grew louder. "I won my championships fairly. If others corrupted the game, that's on them, not me." Sullivan's expression changed, a calculating look replacing his pleading one. "You know, your father made the same choice, refused to be reasonable. And look what happened to him." The implied threat hung in the air between them. For a moment, Michael wondered if there was another gun in this cabin, if history was about to repeat itself. "The difference is," Michael said quietly, "I'm not alone." The cabin door burst open. Tanner Reed entered first, followed by several uniformed officers. Behind them came former detective Marcus Williams, now assisting the investigation. "Robert Sullivan," Williams announced formally, "you're under arrest for the murder of James Jordan." As the officers handcuffed Sullivan, Michael watched the face of the man who had betrayed his father. There was no remorse there, only calculation, still looking for an angle, a way out. "This isn't over, Michael," Sullivan said, as they led him past. "The people behind this won't let it end here." "Maybe not," Michael replied. "But it's a start." Outside, as Sullivan was placed in a police car, Reed approached Michael. "The contents of that drive, it could change everything. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Michael stared at the cabin where his father had spent so many happy days with a man who would ultimately betray him. The simple structure held memories now forever tainted. Fishing trips, campfires, the laughter of friends who weren't really friends at all. "My whole life has been about winning," Michael said finally. "About being the best, no matter the cost. My father taught me that. But he also taught me about integrity." He handed the drive to Reed. "The truth comes out. All of it. Whatever happens next, happens." As Reed took the drive, Michael's phone rang. It was his mother. "Michael, what's going on? There's news about your father's case on TV." "I found the truth, Mom," Michael said, his voice breaking slightly. "About what happened to Dad. About who was responsible." The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. Finally, Dolores spoke, her voice steady and sure. "Your father would be proud of you, son. Whatever you found, he'd want it known, even if it changes how people see him. See me? The truth doesn't change who your father was," she said firmly. "It doesn't change what you accomplished. It just clears away the lies." As he hung up, Michael gazed across Lake Norman, the water reflecting the afternoon sun. For 25 years, he had pointed to the sky after victories, honoring the father he thought he knew. Now he understood that he had known James Jordan after all. A man of principle who chose truth over comfort, right over easy. In the following weeks, as the contents of the USB drive became public, the scandal rocked the sports world. Several NBA executives resigned. 2 team owners faced federal charges. Game-fixing investigations reopened. Daniel Green's case was reviewed, his sentence reduced based on Sullivan's confession. Michael faced the media storm with the same determination he had once shown on the court. Yes, the game he loved had been tarnished. Yes, questions arose about championships won during the era of corruption, but the truth had been his father's last mission. Completing it was Michael's final tribute. 1 month after Sullivan's arrest, Michael Jordan stood alone at his father's grave. He placed a small box on the headstone, containing the real championship ring, finally returned to where it belonged. "We got him, Dad," Michael whispered. "The truth is out, just like you wanted." As he turned to leave, Michael didn't point to the sky as he had for so many years. Instead, he touched the headstone one last time, a more personal connection to the father he had finally come to understand. James Jordan had died trying to protect his son and the integrity of the game he loved. In exposing the truth, Michael had fulfilled his father's final mission. Not with a basketball this time, but with something more precious: the courage to face painful truths no matter the cost. Some questions are better left unanswered, but not this one. Not for Michael Jordan, not for his father. Thank you so much for joining me on this emotional journey through one of sports history's most tragic events. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Whether you're tuning in from Chicago, where Michael built his legacy, North Carolina, where James Jordan called home, or anywhere else around the world, please drop your location in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe for more compelling stories like this one. I post new content every week, exploring fascinating, untold stories from sports, crime, and history. Share this video with friends and family who might appreciate learning about this side of Michael Jordan's story. By spreading awareness about these events, we honor the memory of James Jordan and remind ourselves that behind every sports icon is a human story of triumph and tragedy. Until next time, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.